It's my privilege to share with you the word, the message this morning. This week has been a tragic one for our wonderful city, our beautiful province, our beloved nation. We've all in some way experienced the dramatic and dark fruits of such violence, looting, and destruction. That kind of sowing of bad seed never produces a harvest of righteousness, ever. It has taken us backwards. Our momentum gaining unity once again falters and stumbles. Friends, the days, the months, and the years ahead will be marked by these days. The poor, the rich, and everyone in between is affected. But let us realize we are all in this together. I've had pastor friends of mine from other provinces call me, busy organizing help. I've had a pastor friend of mine from Ireland saying, how can we help? So I want to say, friends, people are rallying around us. It's amazing. The topic of my message to us all today was chosen for me, not by me, by the events of this week. Yet I'm not about to unpack what and why it happened and how it can be avoided in the future. Prior to the unfolding of the events of this week, I'd planned to focus on an aspect of faithfulness. In fact, I'm excited to be embarking on a mini-series on the power of faithfulness, looking at it in relation to all kinds of living, in relation to community, in work, finances, and of course, relationships. But today is a different day. Because of the dramatic and dark week we've all endured, I want to address us on the theme of rebuilding the ruins. Rebuilding the ruins. At such a time, we can feel overwhelmed, bombarded by so many questions like, where do I even start? Is it worth it? It could just happen again. And I don't know what to do. As Sam shared last Sunday, we can feel sorry for ourselves. Oh world, look at us. Don't you feel sorry for us? Oh God, where are you? When I pray, why does this stuff still happen? Friends, I want to say the following. Thousands, even millions of people throughout history have faced the mountain of rebuilding after destruction and burning and disaster. Some have done so without inviting God to help, boasting in their own abilities, but many have partnered with God, inviting Him and seen incredible recovery and restoration out of the ashes. One such example in the scriptures is Nehemiah and the rebuilding of the wall around the city of Jerusalem after its destruction at the hands of her enemies. The place and the people, they lay in ruins. Most had been driven into exile. It lay desolate and forsaken. The few people living there were broken and destitute. In Nehemiah 1, verses 1 to 4, these are the words of Nehemiah, the son of Hakaliah. Now it happened in the months of Chislev, in the 20th year, as I was in Susa, the citadel, that Hanani, one of my brothers, came with certain men from Judah. And I asked them concerning the Jews who escaped, who had survived the exile, and concerning the place, Jerusalem. And they said to me, the remnant there in the province who had survived the exile is in great trouble and shame. The wall of Jerusalem is broken down, its gates destroyed by fire. As soon as I heard these words, I sat down and I wept and mourned for days. And I continued fasting and praying before the God of heaven. Friends, that's the scripture I want to speak into today. Today I want to focus on three questions. Number one, what do we feel? Number two, where do we start? And number three, what can we do? So first of all, what do we feel? What do we feel going on inside of us after this incredible week? What's interesting from this reading of history, and in fact all scripture, is God doesn't work in a vacuum, nor in isolation. The self-existent, self-sufficient one chooses to work through you and I, mankind, in time and in space. He seeks willing men and women who will partner with him to bring life and restoration to humanity's brokenness. What a good God. Yet as you and I look upon the craziness, the brokenness, the devastation, the smoke, the fires, the debris, the food shortages, the medical supply shortage, broken supply chains, the ruins, the hurting people, what do we feel? Despair? Hopelessness? Or anger, hatred, vengeance? I've personally felt a sea of emotions tossing within me. At times I've felt anger. I've even shed tears. But mostly I've felt sadness and compassion. Two things I'm vigilant against feeling are fear and racism. There must be no place whatsoever for those within the hearts of men and women born again by the Spirit of God. Perhaps it's best to start with, what does God feel? What does God see? And if I can catch that. In the scriptures, it speaks of Jesus as he looked over the city of Jerusalem. And as he looked at it, he wept, for he saw them as sheep without a good shepherd. And Jesus felt compassion for these people. They weren't all good people, yet he felt compassion. You see, friends, he never condoned or tolerated injustice or violence or arrogance or pride. But somehow he saw the deficit. He saw the brokenness in them. He saw the reason behind their bad behavior. Jesus told his disciples the reason they behave so is because they have not known the Father. They have not known the love of God the Father. A Father who is good and faithful, ever present, not walking out on them, not abusive, not manipulative, not self-centered or self-seeking. Friends, it's that important that we think about these days and look upon them as God does. That we see broken humanity through his eyes. The same Spirit that raised Christ from the dead, that he had, lives in us. And that same grace empowers us to be able to perceive life through his heavenly eyes. It's a perspective that results in bringing more of heaven to earth and not adding fuel to the fire. Maybe a bit too soon for that idiom, hey? Where do we start? How do we start in feeling what God feels? Firstly, friends, the only way to know his heart and catch his heart for these times and the people is to be in sweet fellowship with him. Daily walking with him, abiding in him. I know of no better place to catch the heart of God than in the place of prayer and worship. Nehemiah, overwhelmed by what he felt and thought, prayed and fasted and prayed, catching God's heart for Jerusalem and its people. Out of his prayer time came the answer to his question, what does God want me to do? Friends, it's out of a place of prayer that question comes. What does God want me to do? What is my role in bringing God's kingdom back here? His will, his rule, his atmosphere. Friends, those are the questions we should be asking at a time like this. And it's in the place of prayer that we catch his heart. Today, friends, we find ourselves like Nehemiah, belonging to God, yet facing a complex mountain before our eyes. But we are children of God, a God who stands for life and not for death, for building, for restoration, not destruction, for hope, not despair. We as the church are a robust people, anti-fragile, ready and able to make a difference. We're anointed with the Spirit of God, carrying the love of God in our hearts, here for such a time as this. I hope we're praying today more than we were praying yesterday, catching God's heart and mind on these times that we find ourselves in. How does God want me to help? What is he placing on my heart to do? What can we do, friends? The second thing. What can we do in making a positive difference? You see, Nehemiah caught God's heart for the place and the people. He caught God's heart for Jerusalem and the remnant. But the next question was, once I've got God's heart, what does he want me to do? Nehemiah felt sad in his heart. We read about this in chapter 2. As he considered the place that he loved and the people he so loved, what was once grand, trashed. What was once beautiful, burnt and destroyed. The people hopeless and afraid. And friends, all he was a wine waiter to the great king, Ahasuerus. And when the king saw his sadness of heart, he said to Nehemiah, "What do you want to do, Nehemiah?" Nehemiah prayed again. He gained courage, and he said, "King, I need to go to the brokenness, not run away from it, not hide from it. I need to go and help. I need to go and rebuild. I need to go and help restore, for this is in my heart. God has placed it upon my heart for that place and those people." And the king granted his request, for God's good and gracious hand was upon Nehemiah. I want to ask you, friends, will you and I catch God's heart for what he wants us to do in Durban right now? Will we be bold and courageous and make big asks, believing that God is with us? Friends, expect opposition. Don't expect everyone to support and applaud you on the good work you're wanting to do. In Nehemiah, there was Sanballat, there was Tobias, and there was Geshem. They rose up to dissuade and stop Nehemiah. They're always enemies of good. Don't be surprised by it, church, but don't quit. Church, you are anti-fragile. The church has withstood opposition and persecution for centuries. Still, the church remains, and it grows anti-fragile and robust because of God's grace. The rallying of community together is what changed everything in the book of Nehemiah. It took a man to start. It took a man who prayed. And then it took a man who was brave and courageous to go. But when he got there, friends, it was the faithfulness of community that changed everything. And I want to tell you, friends, it has been epic to see people come together in this crisis, stand shoulder to shoulder, protecting and caring for their communities under attack, helping each other find food. There is so much power in togetherness. I want to say, friends, we need to get it done together. The faithfulness of community is what carries us. Faithfulness, what a magnificent word. It signifies utter dependability. You can count on me. I will be there. I'm not going AWOL. I won't be shirking. I won't be hiding. I will be present. It's the power of ongoing presence. And friends, when we unite together around a task as a community, the power of faithfulness carries one another. When one becomes weak, another strengthens. And in the book of Nehemiah, each person began to do their part. I want you to listen to this now in chapter 3 of the book of Nehemiah. And I'm just going to read a few little words here from a few verses. Then Eliashib, the high priest, rose up with his brothers, the priests, and they built. Verse 2, and next to him, alongside him, the men of Jericho built. Verse 3, the sons of Hassanah built. And next to them, Meshullam built. And next to them, Zadok built. And next to them, the Tekelites built. Jehoiada, the son, he built. And it goes on and on. And next to them, verse 7, they repaired. And then my son Jaden's name is mentioned. That's where we got his name from. They built. Next to them, Uzziel, the goldsmiths were working. Next to them, the perfumers were building. Next to them, Raphiah, the son of Hur, was building. Verse 10, next to them. And verse 11, next to them. And on it goes. Do you see the picture here? Next to each family doing their part, next to each person doing their part, somebody else alongside them was building. And the faithfulness of community caused a radical change and a shift to the brokenness and the destruction that was Jerusalem and the exiles who were there. It says in verse 6, and so we built the wall, and all the wall was joined to half its height, for the people had a mind to work. What's going on here? Do you have a mind to work to rebuild? Have we got a mind to rebuild? Have we got a belief that this is possible? Not just rebuilding a city, friends, but rebuilding communities, rebuilding people's lives, rebuilding even a nation. Yet, with all the success and delight, there was still opposition. It came at them even harder than before, and their enemy plotted together coming against them to discourage them. But Nehemiah arose and he rallied the community together, saying these famous words, "Do not be afraid of them. Remember the Lord, who is great and awesome, and fight for your brothers, your families, your homes, your communities." Wow, I love that phrase, fighting for your brothers. Not fighting for yourself, not fighting for your own little family, but fighting for those too who are alongside you. We fight for our brothers, the faithfulness of community. I want to say this, friends. If you are white, fighting for your brothers does not mean fighting for the whites alone. If you are black, it doesn't mean fighting for your brothers means fighting for the blacks alone. If you are of a certain ethnic tribe of the blacks, it doesn't mean only fighting for that tribe. If you're Indian, if you're colored, if you're Asian, no. In the scheme of God's beautiful scriptures, the understanding of humanity being sons and daughters of God, it means fighting for those alongside you. Whether they're black, white, Indian, Asian, small, big, old, young, it makes no difference. There's a faithfulness of community God is calling us to. Jesus said, your neighbor is not the one just like you. Remember the Good Samaritan? Not the one just like you, not the one you expect, the one you least expected. So friends, how do we fight for one another? And I want to spend the last few moments talking about how we actually fight for one another. First of all, friends, we start by valuing community. When you value community, you are engaging in fighting for your brothers. Those people who have a high value of community, they understand the heart of God. But when we are more isolated, when we are more independent, when we are more distant from our brothers alongside of us, friends, that is not how we fight for our brothers. Secondly, we understand the power of faithfulness. When we understand the power of faithfulness, friends, that's how we fight for our brothers. And I want to talk more about that in the next couple of weeks. Thirdly, by showing up and being present, we are fighting for our brothers. When you see somebody working alongside you, when you actually are participating with them, co-laboring with them, there's a sense of strength that comes to you because it's the actual showing up and being present that displays, that manifests the power of fighting for your brothers. Also, by finishing what you set out to do. I love the fact in Nehemiah that they didn't just quit when the opposition came. They kept on keeping on. When we keep on and don't quit, when we finish what we set out to do, friends, that's when we display we are fighting for one another. We've also got to learn to encourage each other, friends. That little text that you send, that little "you can do it," that little "I'm praying for you," that's encouraging, that's fighting for your brothers. By praying, but don't stop just praying. As the man who only prays is always outrun by the man who prays and does. So we combine prayer with doing. How else do we fight for our brothers? By helping practically. Spades and gloves and packets and cleaning up and rebuilding. By getting in our cars and taking somebody food or bringing food from home and calling them to come and collect it. By the actual physical scattered servants seeking to bring life and love to our city. We are fighting for our brothers. We are rebuilding the ruins. We are raising up communities. We are rebuilding a city, a province, and even a nation. And we're not doing it alone, friends. We've got friends all around the country and even outside of the country who are wanting the rebuilding of South Africa. By giving, there's another way we fight for our brothers. When we give, not just of our time, not just of our hearts and compassion, but of what we have, of money or foods or spades or cars, whatever it is to help rebuild. By following up is another way we fight for our brothers. Follow up on what you said. Follow up on that person, how they're doing. By following up, we are fighting for our brothers. By refusing the temptation to racism, suspicion, and segregation, we are fighting for our brothers. By refusing to yield to fear and despair and negativity, like so many are starting to, we are fighting for our brothers. Today, friends, was supposed to be, well, it is Mandela Day. We were supposed to do some stuff that we couldn't do. I want to say in the next few weeks, friends, we have a city crying out. We have people crying out. We have friends who have lost premises and businesses, and poor people who never had anything to lose in the beginning, still suffering, yet crying out. I want to say, church, it's time to rise up, catch God's heart. Let's rebuild from the ruins. It's time to look around you, see with the eyes of faith, with hope, and act in love by fighting for your brothers, your community, and your city. It is time to lead. I challenge us all today, not just to watch, not just to spectate, but to build our part of the wall, to rebuild a city, to rebuild from the ruins, out of the ashes. Join me, church, join me. I'm saying let's be present, let's be proactive, and let's be full of faith. I'd love to pray with us right now.